David Suzuki's love of nature and environment started early. It led to a brilliant career as a geneticist and later to international science stardom. Wanting to share his excitement in science, David began a second career, broadcasting. Among the many radio and television programs he's hosted, Suzuki on Science, Future Scan, and the long-running Nature of Things. Most of us know David Suzuki, the scientist, the environmentalist, the television star, but we know little of David Suzuki, the man.
When I was in high school, I was smart, and smart kids in those days became doctors. I knew all my life that I wanted to go into biology. Really, when I was younger, I wanted to be a fish biologist because I loved fishing. I thought, what better life than working with fish and getting paid for it. But then as I got older, I got very, very interested in insects and collecting insects. But I thought, well, what the hell, you can't make a living doing that. So I was kind of vaguely a pre-med like everybody else, and since I was a brain, I was assured that I'd get into medical school. But once I went to college and became an honors student in biology, I discovered genetics, and there was just no turning back. And when I was accepted to medical school in Canada, and when I turned it down to take a position at the University of Chicago, my mother wept for days. She couldn't believe that her son would give up being a doctor to work with fruit flies.
Was it your dad who inspired you in the area of science?
My dad was my great inspiration and hero. My father, had he been born a white person or in a different time, I'm convinced would have been an absolutely great scientist. He had a love of nature that started right from his childhood and went against everything that his father was interested in. His father wanted his sons to grow up to be non-smokers, non-drinkers, work hard and make a lot of money. My dad was always a dreamer. He was constantly collecting plants and insects and fish, and was regarded by his parents, I think, as a bit of a failure. But it was his great love of nature that really inspired me.
And you've passed that love on to your children now, too.
Well, I try. My two youngest daughters are absolutely hooked on the ocean. And I think one of the great things living in Vancouver right here at the beach is that at low tide, they're down there just mucking around all the time. And this is one thing that I tell parents today. I've become very interested in teaching parents of young children that in cities, we tend to teach our children that nature is kind of dirty or dangerous. If a child runs in carrying a spider, mom or dad usually kind of, they recoil in horror. Children learn that very quickly. They learn to fear nature. And I'm convinced that at the heart, a lot of our environmental problems stem from the fact that we are so alienated from nature. And so I can't think of anything more wonderful than having children go down to the beach with their bottoms sticking up in the air, mucking around in the mud and rolling rocks over and collecting things.
I know you always felt like an outsider as a young man. Do you still feel that way?
I certainly am not as hung up about looking different or being Japanese as I was. I realized that I will never be able to march to the same drummer as most of the people around me. And in writing my autobiography, I realized, I kind of put my life into perspective. I see that my life is going to be one of constant struggle and fight. I will never win a victory. It'll be trying to point things out and being passionate about it. But I won't ever become a grand old man who suddenly, at the age of 70 or 80, sees all of his ideas being accepted by society. My life will be constant struggle. And I've kind of decided that the thing I don't ever want to do is stop caring passionately and stop fighting. Because once I do that, it won't signal that I've won. It'll signal that I've given up.
How would you like people to remember you?
I think the best thing I've ever done has been to have children, and that the older ones have become decent people. And that, by far, will be the great contribution I'll make to society. All the other stuff, it really doesn't mean anything. In terms of my impact on the world, I think it's negligible. But I have added some good people to the planet.
Some of her male colleagues have called Iona Campagnolo the lady with the hobnailed boots, one tough babe, and a cross between the Dragon Lady and Mary Tyler Moore. She's a woman who believes you should fight back, finish what you start, and never say die. Great credos for a politician who says she's always operated with 3 strikes against her. She's a woman, a northerner, and from the West.
My life began on Galiano Island, which everyone knows is a very beautiful place. My father and mother both came from there, the Hardys and the Murchisons. You'll find those names in the Galiano Cemetery. And my mom and dad are still alive and well and living in Sydney. And then when I was about 7, we moved north to North Pacific Cannery on the Skeena River. And my dad was the engineer, keeping all the engines of the boats going in the fishing industry. And we lived there in the winter as well. And that was a remarkable time of my life, I think, because looking back on it, I had the chance to grow up with children who were of Indian and Japanese heritage. And we learned a lot of the myths and the stories of the great Tsimshian and Nishka people. And still I think of those kinds of tales as being more in tune with my life than, say, English nursery rhymes ever were.
I understand you started working in a cannery at age 10.
Yes, that's true. But there was no shame in that at the time. Everybody worked.
Now they'd have...
they'd have child laws on you and so on. But in fact, I was first taken down to the cannery when I was about 8, I think, and I was too short, couldn't reach. So even when I was 10, they had to make a little stool for me, and that little stool was there for the longest time because that way I could reach to put the lids in the machine for the salmon. And we would work long hours too, but as I say, it was very usual. Made 42 cents an hour, which was very good money.
Good money.
Yes, 42 cents an hour.
Do you remember when you did the TV show One of a Kind here in Vancouver?
I enjoyed that so much. The first year we took a mobile and went out around British Columbia and interviewed people like Phil Gallardi and champion calf ropers and my dear old friend Gordon Gibson Sr., whom I thought that was one of the great interviews, and my great mentor, Senator Therese Casgrain. I always remember the Fotheringham show where he always said that I had sandbagged him. I thought it was great because I don't think Fotheringham gets sandbagged very often, so that was one of my prides and joys. It was a good show.
In her political career, Iona was a member of Parliament representing her beloved Skeena in the House of Commons. She was Minister of Fitness and Sport, and finally served as President of the Liberal Party. A long-term interest in third world and global problems has led to her present administrative work at McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario.
Think you'll ever get back into politics?
Well, I spent a lot of time saying I've had a good political career and I have enjoyed it, but that I really feel people like me should get out of the way so the next generation can take over. I really love to see the generational change, and particularly when it comes to women. I want to see the second and third and fourth women in these places. It's important that we not be thought the oddballs we were. You know, when I came into cabinet, Monique Bejean and I came in the same day. We were number 4 and number 5 in the whole history of this country to be cabinet ministers. And there have only been 13 or so since Confederation and 462 men or whatever it is. And it seems to me important that those numbers be propelled along. It's a profound responsibility you feel for the next generation, both men and women, that they take the reins of power and that they form the world that they're going to live in.
Iona, your political career, I understand, began with a garden club in Prince Rupert. Did you ever dream in a million years it would lead you where it did?
Well, no, I didn't. I thought that each thing that I would do would be the last thing that I would do in that connection, and here I am years later battling global problems, so I suppose that's the way some people are supposed to develop.